Hello everyone, welcome to another episode of Thinking Modular. Today I have some good news. I'm going to release a new album. It's going to be available on Spotify. You can follow the link on the description where I'm doing a pre-save, and you can also subscribe to this channel in order to receive your notifications every time I release a new video. Today I have a new patch in VCV Rack, and this patch is still related with the previous concepts. It's about feedback loops, it's about non-linear circuits, and somehow related with cybernetics. Since most of the patch that I create, somehow they have the capability to express themselves alone. And this is the main concept of this series of videos of Thinking Modular. So let me show you this patch. Let's listen for a moment. So as you can see, the machine is playing by itself alone. I didn't change any parameter rather than increasing the loudness. So like all my videos, I'm going to create this patch from scratch. Let's start by deleting the models that are part of the circuit. So I already delete all the models, and now the only thing we need is just this delay that is where I'm going to connect my VCO in this input, and then I'm going to connect on the left side of the mixer, and then the VCO goes directly to the right side. So I create a delay in between both channels to create a sort of stereo fill, and then I have my VCO is going to pass through the resonator from Multiple Instruments to give a little bit color to the sound. So the idea of this patch is to create a ring modulation that is going to be a phased ring modulation. I will explain further what it's all about. And then this ring modulation is going to modulate the frequency of the VCO. So it's actually a double feedback. So this is the first part of the machine. So I will need a VCO, and I will need this model from Befaco that is A multiplied by B plus C, where I can create a ring modulation. And I will need also a delay. Let me see if I can find a delay. So in order to create a ring modulation, I have to connect on the first input the carrier, and then on the second input the modulator. Okay, but in this case what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna connect here on the scope. So I have a triangle wave, and then from this triangle wave I'm gonna pass through the delay, and I'm gonna connect also on the scope. And now if I put the mix 100%, I'm gonna leave the color at 50, and I'm gonna take off the feedback. So now as you can see, if I put my delay almost at 0, we have the two waveforms overlapping. But as soon as I increase these values, I start offsetting the phase of the second wave. Okay, as you can see on the scope. That's why I was mentioned that is a ring modulation, is a phased ring modulation. Because now I'm going to connect my output from the VCO. I'm going to connect on the carrier, and then the result of this delay I'm going to connect on the modulator. Okay, so now I have to increase this attenuator in order to affect and open the sound. And now if we listen the result of this ring modulation, this ring modulation, this technique, what it's gonna give me is just, it give me always the same tone, but as soon as I move my delay, it's gonna give me more or less harmonics, as you can hear. Let me as you can hear. Okay, so I'm going to connect the output one in the second channel of the attenuator, so then I can control the amount of modulation, because I'm going to connect this output on the volt per octave, because I want to frequency modulate exponentially. So then here I can control the amount of modulation, as well as I can do negative feedback. So I invert the wave. So then if I connect the output from my VCO, we can hear the result of this. You cannot open too much, because otherwise it's gonna distort the sound. But as you can see, just give me a little bit of distortion to the sound. The second step is to give some movement to the sound. So I'm gonna use a dual function generator from Befaco, and then what I want to do is to use two LFOs, and I'm going to put one LFO on the right side and the second LFO on the left side, because what I want to do is I'm going to pass one of the LFOs through a comparator, and for instance this is going to generate gates, and I want to trigger my envelope on the channel A. And I'm going to do exactly the same for the second LFO. So for this I also need two comparators. So I'm going to bring the two comparators, and I also going to do the same. I'm going to put here on the left side. So then the second step is I need an attenuator, send fixed values, as you can see from the scope, and with these fixed values I can use it as a threshold, because on the comparator I need to connect two inputs, which are going to be the signal. I will explain why. And then on the C input is going to be the threshold. It's like the imaginary line. So every time the signal from the LFO is greater than the threshold, is going to open a gate, because it's going to be true. And as soon as it go below the threshold, it closes the gate, because then it's false. So I'm going to use this algorithm here, that is A equal to B greater than C. So we have to ensure that A is always equal to B, and in order to do that we just have to duplicate the signal and connect in both inputs. And we are going to do the same for the second comparator. Now, from the first channel of the attenuator, I'm going to send a threshold, and for the second channel I'm going to do the same. And now, as you can see on the scope, we have gates being generated. For this one, I suggest you that you use a LFO that is bipolar, from negative to positive values. So then you don't get stuck when the threshold is at 0. And then you can also put thresholds at negative values. So as you can see on the scope, I have two different gates being generated. Okay? And as I told you, the idea is to use these gates to trigger my envelopes in Rampage. So I'm going to connect here this one for the left side that is related to the A channel, and this from the right side related to the B channel. And now if we output on the scope, we can see that the envelopes are being generated. Good. So now the second step, to create a certain kind of variation in the sound, we are going to do a cross modulation in between the two channels from the dual function generator. And for this I will need another a dual attenuator, and I'm going to pass the output from I'm going to connect the output in one of the channels and the output be on the other channel. And now from this attenuator I can control the amount of modulation from 0% to 100%. And what I'm going to do is the first channel is going to modulate the fall time of the second channel, and the second channel is going to modulate the fall time of the first channel. So we have a cross modulation. So let's try to do that. We connect here, and then we connect here on the fall CV. And now if I start open my attenuators, you can see that the waveforms, they start changing slightly. See? So now we will have a more dynamic variation on our envelopes. So now I have two cores. I have the upper core and the down core, and I want to do a bridge in between two cores. So for instance, I have two LFOs and they have two frequency modulation inputs. So this is a great opportunity for me to actually build a bridge between the upper chord to the down chord. And for this I'm going to use a sample hold, and the sample hold is going to be trigger and freeze the voltage from the VCO, the original VCO, and it's going to send fixed values, and these fixed values is going to change the frequency of my LFOs. So we have always different frequencies. And then I can use different amount of modulations for each LFO, so then you create even more dynamic, because you break with the symmetry. So let's try to do that. We will need a sample and hold. So we can use these sample and hold from multiple instruments. So we have to connect our output from the VCO in the input, and then we need something to trigger these sample and hold. And for instance, I don't know if you see in the Befaco Rampage, we have this output signal that it says B greater than A. So what this means is that every time B is greater than A, is like an equation, a logic equation, it says that is true. So it's going to open a gate. And if it's not true, it's going to close the gate. So we actually have some gates being generated through this output, as you can see on the pink waveform. So I can actually trigger my sample and hold. And for instance, this sample and hold is freezing the voltage from my VCO in blue. So now I can bring another attenuator because I will need it later on. So let's connect the output in this input so we can control the amount of modulation and also offset the values. I'm gonna sum the values so I can bring it only for positive or only in negative range. So I'm gonna modulate the frequency of my LFOs. So now, since I build a bridge in between two chords, I have this max output. And this max output is just a combination of the two envelopes. So the one that has greater value is the signal that is going to be output. For instance, if I want to control the amount of modulation, so let's connect here on the carrier, and then if we listen, you see that the signal is changing. So now the second step is I also want to use these frequencies from the sample hold, and I'm going to pass through a attenuator and control the volt per octave in the VCO. And I'm going to just bring a little bit of attenuation so I don't have a drastic change, and I'm also going to offset just a little bit the sound. So now we can also connect the output of the VCO and pass through the resonator. I can also use the output of these sample and hold, and I can control my structure. So as you can see, now it's just a matter of trying to tune and try to find a sweet spot, something that you find interesting, and then you just have to record it. So I hope you enjoy and have fun with your patch and experimenting, and please subscribe if you like this video and you want to see more in the future. Thank you so much for watching, and bye bye. See you.